On the Blood Trail is brought to you by Man Mountain Company. Experience peak flavor.
Oh, freaking smoked them. Gorgeous 4x4, full velvet whitetail. Nothing. I got one. Yes! That is awesome. What a rush. That was crazy, man. How do you like that? Hey, how do you like that? We're out here fishing for burbot. I got longtime friend Spencer Minchau, burbot fishing extraordinaire. Right, Spencer?
By our standards.
By our standards, we're going with it tonight because he's the only one that's brought one in so far. And it wasn't really that big a one, but it's bigger than what I've got so far, so that's all that matters. But yeah, Spencer, how you been, man?
Good.
Yeah. It was a good hunting season for you.
It was.
You shot a nice buck. Did you pick that up from the taxidermist today?
Yeah, today.
Today. There you go. You had a busy day. Holy moly.
Put him on the wall today.
Yeah. There you go. Did he give you the nice like pivot bracket thing too?
Yeah.
Nice. That's what I got online.
Yeah, I love the pedestal mounts.
Oh, I think I had one. How hard do you have to set the hook on these things?
Usually I set them pretty hard. You might have snagged bottom there.
Maybe. Let's see. Yeah, the nice thing about going to Darren there, and I'm not affiliated with him, and sometimes he doesn't answer my phone calls, but he's fast. Like, you shot that deer, what, mid to end November?
Yeah.
And then here we are. It is the last day of this fishing season, March 31st. So that gives him about 3 months, right? 4 months. And your deer was done. That's pretty good.
Yeah, about 4 months.
That's pretty awesome.
That late in the year too.
I happened to notice too, like I was taking a look at your picture that you shared today, and it seemed like the one on the wall has one more point than it did in the picture. Did he fix the brow tine?
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Did you just go off of like trail camera pictures, or?
I actually gave him the brow tine.
You found it?
Yep.
What?
Yeah, it was at the base of the tree.
No way. I remember I
just stuck my hand down in some leaves and hit something hard. I don't think that's a branch.
Wow, that's cool, man. I didn't think that you found it. I thought I asked you, and you said something about like it flew so far through the air. You're like, I'm never finding that.
I thought that because that's this, when I've seen on hunting shows,
yeah,
that's always the story, when the deer runs full speed into a tree.
Yeah, sure.
The point's gone, but not this time. It was right at the base of the tree.
Oh, that's really cool. That's funny. That makes me think of the elk that I shot this year because it's missing one of its front points. And I think it was about a mile away from where I shot it. A day or two prior, we watched two bull elk fight like I've never seen an elk fight before, and that was a pretty aggressive fight. It sounded like we were walking down the fence line, and it sounded like there was somebody way off in the distance just smoking 2x4s together. Like, it was something, because it was dark still, right? And then we get probably within 300 yards, and sure enough, there's two elk just ramming each other back and forth, pushing, shoving. And it made me think, after I shot my bull, maybe my bull was one of the ones that was over there, and maybe if I went for a look over in the grass, there's somewhere I'd find a missing tine. But we never did go check, so maybe this year I'll go take a look around in there this spring, see if I can find just a lone tine. It's kind of hard to find, but
you know, for jobs like that, somebody's got to build like a metal detector, but for tines. Right?
There's got to be some sort of composite material that you can detect with a wand in an antler.
The calcium.
Yeah, the calcium. Oh, man. Yeah.
Can you imagine for shed hunting, too? You wouldn't have to wait for the snow to melt?
That would be so unfair. I went shed hunting a couple days ago, and I walked 4.5 miles. I found the most incredible elk sign and deer sign and moose sign, and I actually bumped like, I think it was like a dozen whitetails. Didn't find a single antler my entire trip. And like, if you would have seen all of the deer sign, even the elk sign and stuff, like I understand some of the elk still have antlers right now, but you would have thought there would have been like 30 or 40 deer antlers in there. It was so like, it was like walking through a petting zoo with all the deer poop and elk poop everywhere. It was so gross. You couldn't walk without stepping in it. And I like saying gross makes you sound kind of wimpy, but like it was everywhere. You know, like there was snow in the bush, and then there was just trails of turds. Like it was so many animals in there, and not a single antler. So either they're all stuck in the snow.
Maybe that's not
the
where
edges,
the bucks were.
It could be that, yeah. But it's also really close to the food source, so I have a feeling that maybe it's all the antlers are dropped in the food source. But I don't have permission to go into the food source, so that part made it a little bit difficult.
Might be worth setting a tree stand up and having a little look with the binoculars to see if it's not full of antlers out there.
Right. I know, I thought about that too.
And that poor farmer's going to have some tire repairs.
I think he kind of expects it. Like, of all the places, like that area is not really known for elk, but that little spot is very well known for elk, for the people that are around there. So I think he comes to expect some antlers here and there. It's kind of crazy, like, because I've spent so much time out there and hunting deer and moose and all that, and I've never really given the elk thing much thought. And then a couple years ago I decided to do a little more exploring, and turns out there's a couple pockets of them, and they're thick into the spots that they're in. And a guy actually shot like a 280 bull in there a few years ago. It might have even been bigger. But I saw pictures of it, and that thing was a stud. He shot it in like 2 feet of snow, so it was a late season bull too.
It's pretty good for our part of the world.
No kidding, eh? Not a northern giant, but an eastern giant. Minburn County. Actually, you know what's funny about that? I'm not too far from Minburn County either, and I went and tried hunting in Minburn looking for elk. Found a really nice bull moose with a cow, and then a bunch of coyotes and deer and stuff. And I called in a couple of elk hunters. So obviously there's elk in there because these guys were locals and they knew that there was elk in there from time to time, but I never did find any. And that was right in the thick of Minburn County.
What do you think causes the elk to be there at times and not at others?
Oh, I think largely it comes down to pressure.
Okay.
Right? Like, because I'm so used to hunting elk in an area that's polluted with elk.
That's what I'm used to, and it seems like in those areas the herds, they stick within a 2 to 5 mile radius. Mm-hmm. You know, this herd's in this area.
Yeah, that's very true. I also think that a lot of it has to do with feed at different times of the year. Like, a lot of the times you don't actually find elk antlers where you would see elk during the rut, because that's not where they're feeding in the off season, right?
Right.
Did you lose your minnow?
I never had one on there.
Oh, I see. But like the area that I went checking out for sheds and stuff, there was I think there's a group of elk in there that's probably like, I want to say as many as 25. It could be as little as 12. But it's so hard because, like, with deer, they leave such a little footprint, and with elk, it could take a couple elk to walk down one trail, and it looks like they've spent a month there, right? But, like, because where I'm used to hunting elk, right? Again, it's hard to talk in code about it, but when I was looking around for antlers the other day, I found spots where I was like, man, this is where I usually hunt elk. Like, as far as you could see, just rubs everywhere. Right? Like, it looked like it was a bull's rutting ground. And that's usually pretty hard to find. But I walked right through the middle of it, and so obviously they spend some time there, and it's a traditional spot because there's older rubs and newer rubs, and So it could be a spot to take a look at a little bit closer. It's also one of those spots where it takes like 15 years to get a draw, unless you want to hunt with a bow. But if you hunt with a bow, I think it's like spike or bigger, so it's not like it's a bad place to go.
Might be fairly competitive if you're bow hunting it.
I have heard that too, yeah. And Ryan's actually been in there as well, and I know that he checked it out, and he said that he found lots of elk tracks and elk sign, but he also said that he found trail cameras and whatever else, because it is public land, right? Makes it tricky. Did you have elk at your place this year?
I did.
Yeah?
When you're mentioning them, if 2 or 3 elk go through, it looks like there's a highway.
Yeah.
That was definitely the case in my crop this year. I happen to have a trail camera out, but I'm going up my field edge and I think it looks like there's being elk in my field, and sure enough, there was elk on the trail camera.
That's really cool. It seems like the population of elk is kind of, not like it's really increasing, but you're finding them in more places now.
Yeah, the area I live, I typically don't hear of elk, or if you do, there's an elk.
Yeah. Yeah,
Or
that's very
it's
true.
very specific areas where people see them, and it seems like we're seeing them more and more and in bigger numbers.
So what was the story with your deer this year? That was a buck that kind of showed up later on in the rut, or did you have lots of pictures of him earlier in the season?
He's one that did a really good job avoiding my trail cameras.
Oh yeah.
I've seen him in person a few times. Didn't get a real good look at him to realize how big he was, and never did until he was on the ground.
Yeah, yeah. But he was an old, big-bodied, big antlered, witty deer, you know, like those are the type of bucks that you don't really get to analyze them very closely until you have them on the ground.
No, in 2022 I tried to hunt him shortly after opening day of bow season, and a doe caught my wind, but I could hear him snorting and running off.
Huh.
So I never did see him, never did get a picture of him for the rest of that year.
So then what happened the night that you shot him? Like, how did that all play out?
I had recently set up a ladder stand. I did some pretty extreme logging to clear up my shooting lane that I ended up shooting him in.
Okay.
It was about an 8-inch tree, so that made all kinds of crashing and banging taking that down.
Huh. And it didn't...
I think it was an hour after that he came out.
Wow. Well, that goes to show you how much noise you can get away with. I mean, maybe the deer, like, I don't know how the deer process the sound of a tree falling over, but I imagine they hear it a little bit more frequently than we do, you know? So, obviously that didn't bother him, but...
As a human, I'd be suspicious of it being dead calm and hearing a big tree coming down.
Right, exactly. Oh, and you shot him with a rifle?
Yep.
Nice. How far?
About 90 yards.
Oh, nice. He just came in all on his own, or did you end up calling him in?
All on his own, on a scrape line.
Huh.
Where I shot him, he was about 10 yards from a really big scrape.
Just doing his rounds?
Yep.
Huh, that's crazy.
Early in the day, too. I don't remember the exact time, but around 3.
Really? Okay. And that was later in November, too, right?
Yeah, mid-November.
Mid-November? Okay, so during the rut.
Yeah.
That kind of gives you that that 10 to 3, 10 to 2 kind of thing that people talk about with those big mature whitetails. I guess bucks specifically. Because, I mean, it seems like... And I found this year, too, while we were out and about. Like, it seemed like no matter where you were hunting, you weren't having very many deer encounters before 9 o'clock, you know? And then 9:30 was when all of a sudden you started getting all this buck activity, and then usually by 3 o'clock, 3:30, somewhere in there, it seemed like it petered right off.
And you got your buck earlier in the season in Alberta this year, right?
The buck I shot in Alberta this year, man, I'm trying to remember. I shot him It was mid-November towards the end, and he was actually, I think it was like the 21st or 23rd, somewhere in there. But either way, he was a 9:31. We had this idea that we wanted to get out to the spot, and I think it was my dad said something like 9 o'clock, and we're gonna see a buck running around or something, right? And so we get to the spot and we're checking out some of the fresh sign because there was a pretty good dump of snow there, and sure enough, here's this buck. We had just found his tracks. Turn and look, and he's cruising through the back of this cut block. And I'm like, wow, there you go, right? And I just assume, like, during the rut, like, I'm not the type of person that really likes to analyze the buck. Like, I look at frame, and that's usually how I make my judgment call. And so I see the frame of this deer, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to shoot him. And I didn't have time to set up a rest or anything like that. So I practically free-handed this deer 200 yards, 250, somewhere in there. And he did the biggest mule kick. Like, I thought he was going to kick right on over, like do a somersault kind of thing. And he took off running, did like a little 20, 30 yard circle and just fell over. But it was one of those things, 9:30 in the morning. And he was out hot to trot looking for does. And we just caught him in a vulnerable spot, you know. And it's funny how, like, there's so many times of the year where you're going after these bucks and it seems like they're ghosts, you know. And then all of a sudden, one day in November, there they are in broad daylight, and you're like, why are you here at this time, you know? And, like your buck, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Granted, he was checking a scrape line, and you were set up in the trees, so that makes a little bit more sense. But, like, I caught mine out in the wide open, right? And usually they're a little bit more smart than that.
Did you have to stop your buck?
No, not really. He was sniffing around, and then he found a spot where he just kind of stopped on his own, and I was ready to take the shot at that point, anyways. Did you stop yours?
Yeah, it was on a pipeline, and he was gonna go clear across it. It just about spooked him stopping him.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing too with those big mature deer, and it's like if you spook them, or if you try to stop them, you spook them and they're gone. Like, you almost want to take them by surprise, I guess. What did he score?
I had him at 171.
Wow, that's a really big buck, man. One of those deer where it doesn't really do it justice until you see it in person next to other big deer.
Yeah, there was... When I shot him, I had no idea he was that big. There was nothing really dynamic about him, but everything was just that much bigger than our typical mature buck in the area.
Yeah, because I remember you sent me pictures of two different bucks, and you're like, which one would you shoot? And I don't remember what I told you, but I I think that, like, size of the deer antler-wise is, like, so... like, you can have a buck, and I've had this argument with people before. You can have a buck that's 4.5 and be in the 160s, or you can have a buck that's like 6, 7, 8.5, and he's past his prime, and he's only a 150, you know, and that 150 is harder to kill theoretically because he's older and smarter, and to me that's a bigger trophy, much like yours.
Interesting dynamic to add to it.
You think so?
Well, it means that much more to you to kill that deer, especially if it's one you have the history with, and knowing the encounters he's lived.
Oh, for sure. Now look out in Saskatchewan where we go hunting there, and it's actually quite amazing that any of those bucks live to any sort of age, you know?
Some of them, you've got to imagine they've had 20 encounters with a hunter.
We're wolves, you know? Like this year when we were out there, I actually saw a wolf and caught some of it on camera running across the road in front of us. And then we found wolf sign, and we thought we got pictures of a wolf on trail camera too, but it's one of those things where it's a bit of a blur, very hard to tell. But in an area where there's not really a lot of deer, and then how many hunters are there? Like, oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever hunted a spot that was so hunter heavy. And then you add wolves into the mix, and it's amazing that some of those bucks get to as big as they do. Like the one that my dad shot at, it blows my mind that that deer survived, you know, to get to that size. And I guess it happens, but it goes to show that they're a tough animal.
There sure seems to be a fair share of that caliber of deer running around in those woods.
Yeah, I think that you find like some areas and they're just better genetically. I've also heard that the biggest bucks and the biggest bulls, for that matter, because like, did you see that new world record elk that was shot? The non-typical. It's almost 500 inches.
I must have seen it, but there's so much of that floating around these days.
Well, I'll show the picture to you. This bull is ridiculous, and he was shot, I think it was in Washington, or Washington. And I listened to the podcast where this guy was explaining how this all went down. Like he had found sheds of this bull before, so like they knew it existed. But they were hunting an area with such a small population of elk that he said that they were able to identify which bull he was just by looking at their tracks, because his tracks were so much bigger than everything else, and there wasn't very many elk there. And so, like, to go back to where we've been hunting deer, not a whole lot of deer out there, and a lot of times you sit all day long without seeing hardly any deer. And when a buck does come in, you know that it's a substantial sized deer, because that's all that's there. And it seems like in a low population area, the quality is better, which I don't really understand why it's like that.
I think the lower pressure. I've noticed a correlation since doe tags opened in our area, and I've consistently shot does every year, that now the bucks are able to grow a bit bigger.
Less competition for food, maybe?
Yeah. I think that's bottom.
Do you?
Is it coming up? Definitely bottom. You freed up.
I freed up. There we go.
You hope that happens, that it comes out from under that rock.
From just pulling in a log. Hey, buddy.
You see how I caught a rock last time? It was just a rock small enough that I could pull it up.
That's true, hey? Huh, so you're saying with lower competition, having taken some of the does out of the area, you think that that's better for the bucks?
The lower deer numbers,
yeah.
Overall less competition. I've noticed.
How was the moose out there this year? You had a draw, didn't you?
No.
No? This year, maybe?
It seems like every year the priority points it takes to get drawn goes up by 1.
Oh, man.
And I'm always 1 short.
That's terrible. It's like that with draw points for anything everywhere, though. Like, that's the hard part. Like, you try to plan a hunt, and then you can't because you're not going on it. You know what amazes me about this? Like, we're sitting here bobbing up and down in the same hole. Like, I've been doing this same jigging motion over and over again. And then all of a sudden, you catch a rock. You know, like, how many times do you hit that rock before all of a sudden the hook's like, you know, I'm going to grab you this time?
Even just to get the angle for it to get under a rock seems amazing.
And then the minnow survives.
The bait buttons are doing their job.
I guess. And the silly burbot don't see this minnow that's like trying to bury itself under the rock and be like, I'm going to get him. They don't even do that. They just keep swimming by.
I think we're a little late in the year.
So, fishing out here for burbot then. When did you start fishing burbot? Like, as a target fish?
I really started last year.
Okay. So when you got into it, did you have like a couple of places in mind that you wanted to go, or was there some research that you did to look into it? Like, what was how did you figure out a starting point for where to go after them?
Some was word of mouth. A lot of it was just looking up lakes in my area, watching what people are kind enough to throw it on YouTube with the name of the lake.
Yeah, that's true.
This spot I actually got from, somebody threw out the name of the lake and was kind enough to fly a drone around where they were set up.
Ah, so that told you exactly where to go. So then when you went out and you tried it, like, did you have success right away, or did you have, like, is there a technique? Because, like, I haven't caught anything yet tonight, so it makes me think that my technique is off. But you've only caught one, so maybe it's an off night. So, like, is there a...
I think it's an off night, or we're not exactly in the right spot.
Yeah.
My experience with this lake spot typically doesn't matter. The population's so high.
Mm-hmm. Granted, we are pretty late in the year.
Yeah. We're definitely post-spawn. I was out 2 or 3 weeks ago, and majority of the fish I was catching were spawned out.
So for a person that doesn't fish a whole lot or doesn't understand that part of it, how can you tell that they're spawned out?
They look like little aliens.
Okay.
They're skinny. It looks like something's wrong with them.
Yeah, alrighty. So when I was growing up, we'd go fishing out on the lake and whatnot, and it was typically like take Dad's boat out and we'd have the family trip and go and just catch pike. Like that was my growing up. And then after you and Ryan became friends, and then through that you and me being friends, we kind of did more of the walleye thing. And that was my exposure to walleye fishing, was going out and doing that. So like my experience in fishing has been pretty little. It was funny, like I was thinking about that on the drive out here. Like people would ask, like, what's your favorite things to do? And I'm like, well, I like to be outdoors. I like to go hunting and fishing and camping. And in the back of my mind, I always knew, but I don't really do that much fishing. You know what I mean? But it was still something, like, I enjoyed doing it. But it's nights like tonight, fishing wise, that make me not want to fish because I'm not catching anything. And I've had a lot of those. And it makes me wonder sometimes if it's just I pick bad days to go, or if I'm just not that good at fishing. But
it seems crazy. I was out on this lake, mind you, it was a different spot, but around 3 weeks ago, and I caught about 40 fish. I don't have an exact count.
Yeah, well, at 40 fish, I think you lose count.
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty big number, man. And that's just doing the same fishing technique over and over again for all those fish, or were you switching it up a little bit?
I switch it up and find what works. It seems to change night to night, even hour to hour. I've had it where the bite might start off and we're doing these big jigs, pound bottom, let it sit. It could be just lifting up an inch or two and dropping it off bottom. It could be shaking it really fast and slowly raising it gets them to bite, or it could just be it sitting still. And it could start out, they want really aggressive jigging. Later on, they'll only hit it if it's dead still.
Yeah. So, you were telling me earlier that, like, once you get a burbot, like, sometimes you don't even realize it's on for a little bit, right? Like, and you said you were watching your rod tip mostly?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I don't feel the bite. Especially if we're doing big jigs. That looks like you might have one there.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I don't know. Not sure what I had going on there. Perfect timing to talk about it, too, you know?
Now the tricky part is to remember how you were jigging it that you got a bite.
Well, just like this. But I didn't know, like, it felt like as I was jigging up, I was snagging on bottom almost.
Yeah, but bottom was coming up. I could notice your rod tip was just bending down a few inches more.
So I had the biggest fish in the lake that was just teasing the hook. That's how fish stories are started, you know? Like, oh man, you should have seen the one. Like, almost had him right to the hole, except it's 27 feet down or whatever in the world it is. So yeah, explain that, I guess, a little bit more so that it's easier to understand. Like, you're basically looking at the tip of the rod, and what are you looking for?
It'll just have more bend than normal.
Yeah.
It could be a lot more bend, it could be a little. I saw there you had a little more bend. It was about an inch or two more than it is in your normal jig.
So very likely a fish.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, we're not in an area with weeds. If we're getting something else, it's a rock, and your rod is
that's
not. It's gonna be stuck to bottom.
See, like, my only experience with burbot before this, and, like, to be fair, I've always kind of forgotten them as a fish. Then you're like, oh yeah, that's right, burbot. They're like the catfish of fresh water, I think. We were fishing for walleye, and Ryan must have caught a burbot, because it was like he was trying to pull in a piece of plywood sideways or something. He was having the hardest time, like, reel, and then try and yank it up, and then reel down on it some more, and then just at the point where he was going to be able to see this fish in the water out the side of the boat, it let go. That
sounds a lot like catching a rock.
You think so?
That sounds exactly like when I caught the rock.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
I bet you it was only a 3 or 4 pound rock, but it was like crank that drag up, pull up, reel,
yeah,
and it would go sideways because it's not going to be perfectly flat.
Yeah,
coming up.
So, like, when we're fishing walleye, I've noticed that some days how you set the hook can be different. So, like, some days it's like the walleye comes in and it'll nibble on the hook 3 times before it really wants to commit. Like, do you find that burbot are the same way, or do you find that, like, they just take it and that's that, or do they play with the bait a little bit too?
I find they more so take it. The biggest difference I've noticed between the two is burbot don't seem to get what people will call stung if you miss a hook set.
Okay.
It seems like they'll come back and hit it. I don't have a camera down to prove it, but I think there's been times I've lost a burbot 3 times part way up.
Yeah.
And it'll keep biting. As far as I know, it's the same fish the whole time.
Interesting. Do they kind of, like, travel in schools like other fish do, or?
During the spawn, they definitely do.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
When I was fishing here in the spawn, yeah, it would be common. Well, that night they were biting. They like to chase, so I'd bring it 10, 15 feet off bottom, and they were biting there. But I could have 4, 5, 6 different marks chasing me up.
Yeah. So, like, on that situation there where it looked like I had something kind of toying with the hook, like, would you have, after noticing that, just set it hard?
Yep, just set it hard. They've got really sturdy mouths. You're not ripping the hook out.
Okay, fair enough. So I learned what not to do, because I did it.
If you're a flavor fanatic, you need this seasoning in your life. Get ready for a taste explosion. Meet the Peak Blend from Man Mountain Company. This isn't just any seasoning. It's the ultimate flavor booster for every dish. Imagine your beef, pork, chicken, or fish bursting with incredible taste. But wait, there's more. Peak Blend is perfect for veggies, eggs, popcorn, fries, and even wild game. It's like having a magic wand in your kitchen. Whether you're grilling, smoking, or just whipping up a quick meal, Peak Blend turns ordinary into extraordinary. Think about it. Every bite, an adventure in flavor. So why settle for bland when you can have the best? Head over to manmountainco.com and order your Peak Blend today. Your taste buds will thank you. Remember, with Peak Blend, every meal is a masterpiece. Don't miss out. Get yours now.
So for you, like, growing up, you were probably maybe a little bit opposite of I was as a kid. Like, more into the fishing all the time, and then you got into hunting a little bit later, right? Oh, what do we got?
Bottom.
Bottom. It's that wind. It's blowing up.
I only went fishing a handful of times before I would have went hunting. I started hunting when I was 12. I think that's around the time I got in more so into fishing, going 4 or 5 times a year.
Okay. What was the thing that interested you in hunting?
When I was a kid watching Bambi, I always thought it was so cool where the hunters were talking as Bambi's mom. to Bambi. I think that was my favorite movie when I was 4 years old. I do remember being 4 years old thinking, wow, this hunter thing's cool. Like,
Yeah.
how are they talking to Bambi?
And then you shot your first deer and you were just hooked.
I think my first kill was a gopher.
Oh yeah? How did that play out? Do you remember how that went?
Dad handed me the gun, pointed at a gopher, and
Said,
made sure
"Shoot,
I was
son."
very, very still. And very slowly squeezing the trigger, and down went the gopher.
Well, you gotta learn somewhere, you know? It's funny. I have to explain that to my son, that he still has to wait to be able to go. Cause what is it in Alberta now? I think it's 10 years old. You can go out hunting birds with a adult supervision or something, and then at 12 you can go and hunt big game. But he tells me all the time, he's like, Dad, this time when we go out, I want to shoot it. I'm like, well, I understand that, but like, not within the guidelines just yet. But he's got so much interest in it. He was with me for the buck I shot in Alberta last year. He was so excited to watch it go down. And then when we went out and recovered it, I let him walk up to it first. Like, I knew it was stone cold dead, so anybody's like, it's gonna kick. No, it was dead. It was very dead. We watched it fall over, and then we gave it like a good 10-15 minutes before we even went up to it.
You don't need to recreate the Yellowstone bison video?
No, certainly not. But let him walk up to it first. He was the first person to get to pull the antler out of the snow and look at this buck. And like, to me, like, those are memories I'll never forget. And I feel like it's the same for him. But even yesterday, I think he was telling me, he's like, yeah, Dad, remember that second deer that we got together? I'm like, yeah, of course I do, you know? He's like, yeah, I just can't wait to go do that again. Like, it's so exciting to him.
Does he have his first BB gun yet?
No, I haven't bought him a BB gun. You know what I did buy, though, to kind of teach him how to start shooting? And I guess a BB gun's probably a more practical or reasonable starter. But I bought a little single shot Badger 22. And it's like one of the takedown ones that you can fold in half. It fits in your backpack kind of thing. So it's a really light little gun. And I want to teach him how to shoot that, because it's got all the proper like iron sight style and everything.
Okay.
And I feel like it's something that he can hold and kind of manage. But I do want to teach him how to shoot that, so that he learns not to be afraid of shooting a gun. I feel like when I first started hunting, I didn't really have as much exposure to that side of it. Ryan did a little bit more, because when I started getting into it, he did too. And so, being 3.5 years younger, he got exposed to shooting and stuff at a younger age than I did.
What did you start shooting?
A 243, actually.
Wow.
And I remember sitting behind that gun being terrified to pull the trigger, because I had just heard stories of recoil, you know. And at the time, my dad was shooting an earlier model, a Weatherby Vanguard in the 257, and he always talked about how it kicked like a mule. And Weatherby, like, they're known to have like the little bit of extra punch behind all their guns, right, and all their calibers, cartridges. And it could be the design of the stock. Like, stocks have changed so much nowadays that recoil isn't felt as much, and then everybody also throws a muzzle brake on there, and it makes shooting some bigger calibers a lot more manageable. But I'm sitting behind this 243, and I'm like terrified to pull the trigger, because I'm thinking this thing's gonna like blow my shoulder off and knock me out and give me a black eye. And the other part of it too was, like, as a kid, I remember my dad used to hunt in the Edmonton bow zone, and during the like shotgun portion of the season, he'd go out with his 12 gauge, and he had a rifled barrel and a scope on it, and every year he'd shoot at a buck and he'd scope himself with this shotgun, right? And it always left a pretty good mark or a black eye or something like that. And so all these things play in the back of your mind when you're like 11, 12 years old and you're shooting a gun for the first time. And then I pulled the trigger on the target, and I was like, I didn't even feel it. And then it was like, oh yeah, all the confidence is there, you know, like it's not really that bad. So got started shooting the 243, and then funny enough, the first big game animal I ever shot was with a 30-06, which is considerably larger than a 243. Looking at it now with a little bit of expertise behind it, I'm surprised that didn't worry me a little bit more. And I was very aware of the fact that it had recoil when I was shooting it, you know. But I also didn't shoot my first animal until I was 13. I must have been, it was funny because Ryan and I were joking about this not too long ago, and I joke about it with my dad too, because he was the one that was probably wanting to like punch a window out of his truck every time we got back from a hunt, because I passed up every single buck we saw. Every single buck. I must have had this idea in my head, and this makes me sound like such a inexperienced child when it comes to hunting or inexposed or something. But we watched a lot of Realtree monster bucks, and I had this idea in my head as a 12-year-old boy that I wasn't shooting something unless it was ready to pull the wall down when I got it mounted, you know what I mean? And so I passed up all these deer, and like some really nice bucks, and a couple of them, like once I passed it, somebody else would shoot it kind of thing. And so then all of a sudden when I was 13 years old, first animal was a bear. Shot that, got that out of the way, and then I still had this thought in my head, like, if I'm going to shoot a whitetail buck, I want to shoot a nice big whitetail buck. And the first whitetail buck I ever shot, I shot it with my bow. It was my first bow kill. And in the Edmonton bow zone, Ryan and I are sitting in this blind together, and this little 1.5-year-old buck, he was a 4 on one side and a spike with a brow on the other side, comes in with his doe, and I missed the doe. I was like, I'm going to shoot the doe. I missed her. I sent the arrow just over her back. And they didn't really know what was going on. We were in a ground blind. And so they kind of calmed down a little bit. And then the buck came within shooting distance. He was 28 yards. And Ryan looked at me and he's like, you're shooting that buck. And I'm like, all right, I'm shooting that buck. You know, like I'll pull the tag on this buck. And so I come to full draw, nervous as ever, take the shot, hit the buck. I hit him. I didn't make a very good shot. I was so nervous, and got lucky, hit an artery. He went on a pretty considerable run, but left like still to this day, one of the best blood trails I've ever had on a bow kill. And got my first buck, man, with a bow. But yeah, I guess rabbit holed a little bit there, but that's kind of the early starts to me going hunting. But like, I went hunting with my dad when I was a kid and stuff too, and he used to bring stuff home all the time, and I remember some of it, and a lot of it I see pictures of like being in the garage with dead deer or dead moose on the garage floor and getting pictures with it and stuff like that. But yeah, it goes by fast too, you know.
It won't be long and that'll be you and your sons having stories like that.
That's true. I do have pictures of both him and my daughter behind deer that I brought home on the garage floor. Same thing. It's pretty cool.
She's got to be getting to the age that she'll be expressing interest and stuff like that. Is
She
hunting
asked
in
me
her
today.
future?
You know, I think it could be. She loves animals, as most little girls do. But she likes to eat them, so I think that's a good way to get her into it. That was the other thing too, because for my oldest, he wanted to go out and shoot something that we could eat. You know, like that's his thing. He asked me tonight, because you said that we could keep some fish if we caught some good sized ones, and he's like, yeah, bring it home, I want to eat it. You know, like he's so interested in trying all of it. And he'll ask me, he's like, Dad, like the other day, he's like, Dad, could we shoot an owl and eat it? And I'm like, no, son, I don't think we could shoot an owl and eat it. I'm like, and even if we could, I don't think that I'd want to eat it. Why not? I'm like, yeah, it's just some animals that you don't eat, you know? Like, I don't really know how to explain it any better, but he does have such an interest in it. Like, we'll sit down and we'll have steak, and he's like, is this the deer that we shot? And I'm like, yeah, it is. Awesome. I like it. But he's so hooked on it, every angle. And then my daughter, she's like, even today, she's like, I wanted to go fishing with you. And I'm like, I don't think you really did. Like, I think you wanted to go, but then once you get out there, it's like the interest is like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be here anymore. And then she gets a little bit upset or sad about it. And
it is a tough thing that we're night fishing at this time of year.
this is true. And this is definitely past the bedtime, but
My first night of the year out here, wasn't super close to them, but there was a family out, and you could see they had littler kids that I don't think they were much past 8 years old if they were.
Oh, okay.
And they were out here catching fish.
Huh. Yeah, see, she's turning 4. And I'll probably try to get her out hunting, maybe this fall. Just so that she can see it and be a little more exposed to it. But like, I bring her around with whenever I shoot an animal, and she gets to be around the animal afterwards and stuff, and she always thinks it's cool.
And 4's the age your oldest started coming out with you, right?
Yeah, he just turned 7. So 6, 5, yeah, 4. He would have been 4 the first time I took him hunting, and we shot that doe together, and he just loved it, every bit of it. And come to think of it too, I think I let him walk up to that deer first too, and poke it with his little toy gun, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, man.
Are both kids coming when it's time to bring your daughter?
Probably, yeah, if I had to guess. He's gonna want to be like, hey, look at this, watch this part. Like, this is so cool. Be careful right here, you know, like he's
He'll teach her.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But he still has so much to learn. He's very cautious. Extremely cautious, and I think that most of that's probably a parenting approach. Like with our youngest, we're like, oh yeah, well, let him learn. If he falls off that chair, like they got these little toy chairs at home, and he's got this thing now where he wants to climb on top of them, and it's like, if he rolls off of it, he rolls off of it. Maybe he'll learn not to do that next time. But like with the first one, it was always like, oh, are you okay? Like, oh, be careful. And I don't know, it's probably just,
You kind of realize that they're okay with,
yeah, you know, like they can take
99% of the falls.
Exactly, they can take a lot more. I don't want to say damage as the right word, but they can take more damage than you realize.
They're small for a reason.
Yeah, but yeah, so he's always more cautious. Like when I shot that buck last year in the cup lock, it's funny, every time he talks to my dad's like, are you ready to go back to the cut block? Because he was so tired of, like, getting out to the deer was fine, but walking back to the truck where we were dragging the deer to, he's like tripping and stumbling over every log because there's so much snow, and right, you know what it's like in an Alberta cut block. And he was so frustrated, and he was starting to get snow in his clothes, and his gloves were wet, and he was so upset. And we're like, this is just part of it, you know? Like, you have to understand, like, there's the highs of going out and finding a spot and getting your deer and all of that part of it and getting to admire it. But then there's also the work that is involved after the fact, right? And so getting him used to that part of it, we got to do a little bit more of that. But it's been like taking him on a little longer walks to our spots and stuff like that, and it's been helping with getting him used to it. It's fun to watch though, because like you can tell from time to time, like they learn so much more, and then
how to not fall over every stump that's
exactly there. Right? Like there's being cautious, and then there's being like proactive. So instead of coming up to a stick and being like, I need you to help me over this stick, now they notice that it's there and they know how to get over it, kind of thing. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. He enjoys it, and I want to take him out to do more. I can't wait until he can sit in a tree stand, because I'll drag him out into every tree stand with me and just have him sit there in a harness, and he'll love watching deer and everything else from up in the tree.
And I'm sure he knows to sit super still when they're that close.
Yeah, so I took him out. We were going to go look for deer one night, and this was after I shot my elk this year. And so we went to this other spot where, like, I know there's elk that are over there, but we had also known there's some pretty good whitetail bucks. So I was hoping to see a nice whitetail with him and try and shoot it. But we're sitting there, and like, you know how elk, like, they can have so many different trails that they'll take, and you never really have a rhyme or reason as to why they take one night over the next. So we're sitting there in this like really tall weedy shrub grass, and all of a sudden all of these elk pour out like directly where we were out on the edge of the field, directly right next to us. They piled out right on top of us. And like, you can all of a sudden, like, it's funny because elk are so quiet, and then all of a sudden when they want to come out, they just like the loudest thing in the bush, you know? They're coming out and announcing themselves. And so all these elk start pouring out, and it's just cow after cow after cow. And there's this cow standing like 20 yards from us. And I'm telling him, like, don't move, you know? And he's like trying to like peer over and see over the grass. I'm like, no, don't move. Like, they're looking at us. And we must have been inside of their comfort bubble, or whatever you want to call it, because they didn't really care that we were there. And we could kind of turn and get away with a lot more than we should have been able to. And then after, I think it was about 8 or 9 cows come out, the bull came out as well, and kind of chased them around and chased them off. But that was so cool. He was so surprised. And like, one cow, I'm sitting there super quiet and super still, and he's kind of like moving around in the grass. So like, obviously she could see something moving, and she come closer and closer and closer and turn her nose up and trying to see what he was. And he did a really good job. I was surprised. Didn't make too much noise. He's good when you're in the heat of the moment like that, and you're like, okay, don't move. And he's like, okay. It's funny. So I forgot about this until I brought this up, but we're sitting there, and I'm like, okay, buddy, don't move. She's looking right at us. And he looks at me and he goes, I'll be as still as a tree. And puts his arms up to the side. I'm like, no. I mean, yes, but no, you know, like that's what we want, but it's not what we're going for. Oh, it was so funny. Kids, man, it's a lot of fun. It adds another element of difficulty to the hunt, but it's when it all happens and you have success, it makes it so cool.
Do you think you're going to start him with big game hunting? Or are you going to try something smaller like a grouse?
Maybe something smaller. I think he'd have interest in doing that. Especially if he's allowed to at a younger age. He would like to do that. He's told me before he wants to go and shoot squirrels and pretty much anything. If he could shoot anything, he would, you know? So I think we'll probably start with something smaller and then work it on up to some big game. And then I seen also that Alberta's changing it so that for minimum draw with archery equipment is going to be changed to 35 pounds. And I can see the benefit to that. Like, as a little kid getting into it, it makes it a lot easier for them to do it. But at the same time, I still think that 40 pounds is something that a person should be able to draw if they're bow hunting, you know? Especially when modern equipment nowadays, like, this is the argument that people tell me, is that equipment is much further advanced than it was when they set the 40-pound draw limit, you know? And it's more efficient and it hits faster and harder and whatever else. But at the same time, bows are easier to draw now than they were when that was a thing, you know? Like,
also the arrow technology, I think when that, I'm not sure the exact date, but I imagine that was during the time of the aluminum arrows.
Yes.
Which had
Definitely.
Way better penetration from the higher grains per inch.
Yep. Yeah, they hit harder. And now, like, I guess guys like to build heavy arrows and whatnot. I still think, like, I like speed. I think speed kills. Granted, I have to have a heavier arrow kind of anyways because of my draw weight and draw length, but I still think that speed's a good thing to have. I don't necessarily think that you need a 600 grain arrow and left-handed beveled single piece broadhead and 17 blazer veins on the back to stabilize it. Like, I think that's a little bit overkill, you know? But
those are I think the term is a plan B arrow.
yeah,
You have your plan A, it's gonna go, it's either breaking the rib or going between the ribs, and it's this perfect double lung or heart shot. And plan B is, oh, I've shot 6 inches, a foot away, it's a 1/4-2 shot, we're putting it through some heavier bone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I kind of compare that, like, when you get a guy that has a, let's call it a 600 grain arrow, because I think that's a little bit heavy, but it's, some guys do that. I feel like that's comparable to the guy that used to shoot deer with a 243, but then his shooting isn't as good as it used to be, so now he shoots a 300 Win Mag because he thinks that makes up for poor shooting. You know what I mean? And I think that guys that are like, well, I'm afraid of hitting the shoulder with my 460 grain arrow, so I'm going to up it to a 600 grain arrow, and now I'm not afraid of the shoulder anymore. You know, I think that's kind of a similar concept. Whereas to me, I think that it's more or less just put the projectile in the better place, you know?
I very much think it's a situational thing. If you're able to always have that 15, 25, 30 yard shot, the heavy arrow that has the effect on a plan B type of shot is, I think it's the superior setup.
Sure.
I think, but the speed killing, when you don't, if you ever misjudging your yardage, you're shooting 40 yards but it ends up being 50.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you're not that far out of a shot if your arrow's going that 300, 330 feet a second.
Yeah, that's very true. Pros and cons, I guess, to both of them. I've also had, like, I killed an elk a couple years ago. Granted, it was 3 yards, but I shoot mechanical heads, and I plowed it straight through the middle of that bull's shoulder blade, and it stopped on an offside rib. And most guys feel like shooting an elk, if you hit him in the shoulder with a mechanical, like that's a lost elk, you know? And I busted right through that shoulder blade with a mechanical. And my arrow is only like 475 grains, 476 grains, somewhere in there. So it's not like it's really, really heavy. But like at the speed that the bows are shooting now and the kinetic energy that comes off of those arrows, like it's still an extremely effective arrow. Did you get out much with the bow this year?
I didn't shoot my bow all year.
Really? Wow. Just choice or busy or?
I've really been liking the waterfowling the past few years.
That's very
something
true.
I'm more so getting into. Still very much a beginner waterfowler, I'd say, but
yeah, but you see
when we do get those limit hunts, it makes it so worth all the effort.
Yeah. No kidding. I know. Ryan always sends me the pictures of you guys having the limit nights. And I'm like, man, I need to come out for one of those. That'll be a lot of fun.
The tricky thing is with me being a beginner, it's those always, they catch me off guard. I go out thinking, okay, there's enough here. It's worth a hunt. It looks like it's kind of average. And then there's 5 times the birds I expect show up, and they're all coming right in.
I remember you were telling me, you were saying something about getting ducks. And I was like, oh, so some nights you go out there and like you target ducks, and you told me some nights it's just a duck hunt. The ducks are what comes in, you know? I think that's great. What do you think about this spot, Spencer?
I don't think your kids are going to get to taste a burbot.
No, especially when...
I think we let the only one around go.
No kidding. He was... Yeah, we got an hour and a half left.
I think we can pack it up and fish somewhere without the tent.
You think so?
For a little bit.
Give that a go.
If you're wanting to not come home empty-handed.
I just want to catch one.
You had one hooked for about 5 seconds.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, and like it would have been nice to know that that's what it was, but inexperience, lost in that situation.
Part of it definitely is the cheaper rods, the lack of sensitivity with them.
Yeah, I would say that's
but
probably a big part of it.
it's a very, very different bite with the aggressive jigging.
Yeah. Well, like for those listening and watching, the rod that I have, I don't really understand what's going on with it. I'm not used to doing the ice fishing rod thing, and I'm starting to think that like a paint stick with line wrapped around it would have been more effective for me tonight. But I've tried switching the handle from the left side of this reel to the right side, and it still reels backwards.
I think you spooled it reeling it backwards.
You know what? That's a good point.
I don't see how else that happened. I think when you spooled it, you reeled backwards the whole way.
You know, I'm going to leave that in there because I think that's a good, valuable lesson. But yeah, I think I definitely reeled it backwards. Because thinking about it now, had I reeled it the other way, I wouldn't have this problem with where the line is on the reel, and then I also wouldn't have the problem where when I lock it, I can only reel backwards. Thanks,
So I think our solution, when we're driving to the second spot, we're going to cast out the window, spool all the line out.
Watch it snap off, and then be like, well, there goes the line on that one.
Oh no, we'll find it. We got a glow hook.
Oh, wow, I just made myself look really stupid. But you know what? That's okay. That's all right. Because not all of us are genius fishermen. And I certainly am not. What's the plan here? We're going to rip this down?
I think so. Give it a little try somewhere else to confirm the suspicion of being too late in the year.
Are you wanting to set up the tent again?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
It's warm out there.
It's warm out there. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. Spencer, I had to really twist your arm to do it in any portion of it, and we're gonna have some real dry moments in there. But you know what? It's real conversation. We're out here having a fun time. And yeah, so thanks for doing it. I appreciate it. On the Blood Trail has been brought to you by Man Mountain Company. Experience peak flavor and use code BLOODTRAIL to save on your next order over at manmountainco.com.